JJ and I decided we were going to try to make this a calmer session, though we are still going to share lots of amazing things with you. JJ, do you want to introduce yourself really quickly?
Yeah, I'm JJ Morgan. I'm conference coordinator for the CI Summit for VOCES. It's a team effort. I get the title, but everybody else helps too. Um, I have taught for over 10 years, high school Spanish. I have a blog, which is very sorely unattended these days, but still has lots of good resources on it, especially for some of the breathing activities that you've seen, and that we might have time to do too.
And I'm Erica Paplinsky-Burge. I taught for 18 years, and my master's work and in my plus 30 work, I focus not only on Spanish, but also neuroscience. And I'm obsessed with it and love it. And I'm super excited to share some things that I think will be useful to you.
Yeah. I also have a graduate certificate from Butler University on applied educational neuroscience, and have done similar studies to Erica's.
All right, let's get into it, JJ.
Okay, so today, actually, let's go back. Welcome to Where Language Learning Meets Neuroscience. Today, we're going to focus on what happens in our brains when we process language, how neuroscience can support your classroom, and some practical strategies that you can use right away.
So in your brain, like brain basics, you have these things called neurons and axons. And what happens when you do anything is that a neuron, or more likely a group of neurons, sends a signal along the axons to other neurons, which sends a signal along more axons to other neurons, and so on and so forth. And when we are doing something challenging, like learning how to juggle or a new sport or learning a new language, our brain needs to create entirely new axons or pathways between neurons, or it has to use chemicals to strengthen the neuron or the axons that are already there. This is hard work for our brains, and our brains don't want to really do this hard work unless we think that there's a good purpose or unless we think that it's useful and interesting. And so that's part of why it's so important that we choose topics that our students can connect to, because that's the way that their brains are going to suck up the language in the most efficient way. Now, can we get the next slide, JJ?
Yes.
Our brain is kind of like a muscle in that the parts that we use more often become stronger and faster. In fact, those parts can process up to 100 times faster, which is why our brains need so many repetitions of important vocabulary structures or vocabulary, so that they can build that muscle up and that communication becomes easier and easier. And this is kind of like the feedback loop. If you've ever once those, sorry, what I meant to say is once those axons are built and reinforced, then the activity becomes more enjoyable. We become faster at it and we want to do it more. And you've experienced that if you've ever, tried to learn a new language or a new sport or to juggle. And at first the thing was really, really hard and you didn't really enjoy it, but then you practiced and you're like, oh, this is a little bit more enjoyable. And you started to enjoy it more. And then you practiced some more and you started to enjoy it more. And if you've ever felt that way, and I know I've done that both with learning languages and sports, and I did dance before, and then also learning an instrument, that's what happens is your brain builds up these connections and it becomes easier and more enjoyable, and then you want to do it more and you become better at it. And languages are the same way. JJ, you want to explain the next slide?
Yes. So when we're thinking about how the brain is set up, you have an amygdala, which a lot of you might know this, some of you might not know this, but everyone has an amygdala. All animals have it. It is the oldest part of the brain. It is so old that reptiles predominantly, that is what their brain is predominantly amygdala. The amygdala is in charge of fight, flight, and freeze. So freeze often gets overlooked. Freeze can look a lot of ways. Freeze can also be called shutdown. And shutdown which is what shutdown is what I have seen a lot with post-COVID students, a lot more than I ever saw before. And it has absolutely nothing to do with demographics. It has everything to do with living through the trauma of COVID for these teenagers. And shutdown can look like this, with your head on your arm on your desk and your eyes closed. And it might not be because the student stayed up too late playing video games, which is our first thought. It might not be that the student's parents aren't teaching them to go to bed at an appropriate time. It might not be that they're staying up late texting their friends. It probably is that they're in shutdown. And that happens because the amygdala takes over your brain. It has one function and one function only, and that is to keep the body safe, to keep the human that surrounds that brain safe. When the amygdala senses danger, the amygdala takes over your brain. So for some of us, it makes us stand up and fight. For some of us, it makes us run like crazy to get away from the situation. And for some of us, it makes us freeze. And it will be different in different situations. But here's the thing about the amygdala. The amygdala only sends information out. It sends signals out. It takes over the entire brain, especially the thinking, analyzing, planning, prefrontal cortex. You can be thinking, I shouldn't be acting this way, and not be able to do anything about it because your amygdala is in charge, and your amygdala is standing there, or is telling you to stand there and fight, or your amygdala is telling you to run like crazy and get out of the situation, or your amygdala has shut you down and you're the kid with their head on their desk, right? So it's really important to understand that the way we interpret behaviors socially might not actually be what's going on with the student. They might not actually be disrespecting us or the educational system or their school or their learning. They might just be in shutdown and not able to do anything else. And if your brain is in any of those three states, fight, flight, or freeze, zero learning, zero acquisition, nothing happens because nothing is going to come in to the brain. Nothing. Only the signals coming out from the amygdala go out. So this leads into, Erica has this beautiful analogy for bottom floor, top floor.
Okay, so I have explained this analogy that I'm going to share with you to kids as young as kindergarten, because I think knowledge of how your brain works and how your body work together is powerful for kids at all walks of life and for people in all walks of life. So the way I explain that to kids is that your brain has two floors. It has a top floor and it has a bottom floor. Now, the bottom floor is super, super important. It does all the things that keep us alive. It keeps your heart breathing. It keeps you heart beating. It keeps you breathing. It keeps you from walking over things and tripping and falling. It does all of the things you need to do just to exist in the world. The top floor is your decision makers. We're talking about, the prefrontal cortex. This is the part of your brain that helps you make your very best decisions and do higher level thinking. Now, for survival purposes, if you feel even a tiny bit of stress, the bottom floor of your brain says it's an emergency and they pull the ladder to the top floor. Okay. And then only your bottom brain is making decisions and they can't even hear what the top floor might be saying to them. And this is a great feature in our brains because it keeps us alive and it protects us from danger. But also, we need to be able to control this, right? And be able to put the ladder back up so that we can hear our top brain helping us to make our best decisions. And the students always find this very, very interesting and empowering that their brain is just doing this to help them, and that they have a way to put that ladder back up so that they can hear both floors of their brain. And part of the way that we do this, we're going to get into this more in a little bit, is with breathing. Because as Lorena and Justin talked about, when you are tuned into your body and you can feel your heart rate speeding up and you can feel yourself breathing faster, then you know that you're getting into this agitated state, but you can use breathing to communicate with your brain and calm yourself back down and put that ladder back up. And we're going to talk about a couple of different breathing techniques in addition to what Justin and Lorena shared with you that were so interesting in just a moment. A bonus, and this is very, very important for teachers especially to understand, is that students have in their brains this thing called mirror neurons. Now, we've already talked about how neurons send signals along axons, and that causes you to do anything. So if you were in the middle of teaching and all of a sudden your principal and superintendent walked into the room, one set of neurons would send signals that recognize a noise, another set would turn your head. Because we're teachers, another set would be scanning your students, hoping everyone looks really engaged. And because we're really good at that, all of those things happen very fast. Mirror neurons are very special neurons, though. Mirror neurons are mirror neurons. And what that means is that if you see someone doing something that you've done before, like taking a drink of a cup of coffee, the same neurons that are firing in my head when I take that cup of coffee are firing in your head. Now, scientists aren't sure the purpose of mirror neurons. It might be to build empathy for learning or to help us predict what someone's going to do. But that's why if you're watching a scary movie and you're really into it and like the monster is sneaking up on the protagonist, you will feel scared and you'll feel the hairs in the back of your neck stand up. Or why if you're watching a sports game and someone gets injured, ooh, you'll feel it in your body. Or why you might feel your stomach turn if you feel something gross. It's because the same neurons that are firing in the person's head are firing in your head. Now, the takeaway for when you go into your classroom is that if you have that one student that is just giving you the hardest time and you are feeling super frustrated and you go and address that student and that frustration is in your eyes, they're just going to mirror that same frustration back to you. And any chance that you had to connect with that student or move on is gone, because they're just going to mirror that same frustration back at you, and you two are going to mirror the energy right back and forth to each other. So we can use breathing to calm ourselves down and make sure that we are calm when we go and address that student. Or I even use it with my own children sometimes when my own kids are driving me nuts. It's a very, very powerful technique, breathing. And knowing the emotion that you're giving out is really important for kind of controlling the room. It's the same reason why it's really important for teachers when we can to not spend a million hours planning and not stay up all night making the most beautiful slides ever. Because if you go into class just exhausted and drained because you've given everything the night before, you'll mirror that to your students and they will mirror that back to you. And that's not what they want. So mirror neurons are a scientific reason for teachers to take better care of themselves. It's really important because whatever energy you give out to your students, they're going to give right back to you.
Okay, so let's take a moment and think about a situation. So I'm going to share a situation that happened with me. And then I want you all to think of something similar. On this particular day, I did not show up as my best self in the classroom. I had a student in the back of the room, and she knew every single one of my buttons, and she was pushing all of them on repeat. And I got to the point, I just got more and more and more and more and more amped up that she said something to me and I whipped out something super sarcastic and probably not very nice back at her. Now, it wasn't anything that would like get me fired or anything, but it just wasn't nice. And I'm a nice person and that's who I want to be. And so a student in the front, little Kaylee, looked at me and said, "Whoa, Senora, that just escalated. I think we need to breathe." I had done so many breathing activities with the students that they knew what was going on. They saw the situation and she knew what to do to calm me down and get me back to my normal self. So I sat down in my chair and I said, "Thank you, Kaylee. Would you please lead us in any breathing activity that you can think of?" And she did. She stood up in the front of the class. And when she was finished, I stood up and I said, "Thank you." And I looked at the student in the back of the room and I said, "I am sorry that I allowed that to escalate. And I um, was not my best self when in class with you. And I hope that we can restart at this moment." The student looked at me and said, "I'm sorry too, Senora. We'll both be better." Did it take time out? Did it take time away from the lesson? Yes, but it not nearly as much time as it would have taken if I had just gone straight into battle mode and sent that student to the office and then been escalated and nothing would have been resolved. The student would just had a grudge the next day and been really upset when they came back into class and probably would want to do it again. So I want you to take a moment and just think of a time when you didn't show up as your best self in class. Maybe you had things going on outside of school. Maybe a student was pushing your buttons. Maybe an admin um, gave you a random assignment to do that had nothing to do with teaching and was really just irritating you. Just think of a situation when you were just not your best self. And I'm going to sit here and be quiet while you do that. As you're thinking of that situation, notice how your body feels. Did your heart rate pick up a little bit? Did you have a flashback that sent you into maybe feeling a little irritated, anxious? Right, and maybe the copy machine jammed right before class and you were trying to make copies and you couldn't do it, so you couldn't do your activity, right? Tension in the neck. Yeah, so a dysregulated teacher can't regulate students. A dysregulated teacher through the mirror neurons is going to cause their students to be more dysregulated. So now we're going to take a moment and breathe. Erica, do you want to lead your favorite one? I know you have one that you always do in a session.
I do. This is my favorite one because it's fast, it's simple. With my students, I do it in the target language. So we're practicing counting and inhale and exhale. I will even do this, with my own children when I'm feeling really frustrated before I go and talk to them. And all we're going to do is we're going to breathe in through the nose for 4. And this is a really deep breath. It's not like a shallow breath. So if you put your hand on your belly, you want to feel your belly expanding under your hand. So we're going to breathe in through the nose for 4. Hold our breath for 7, and then we're going to breathe out nice and slow for 8. Sometimes I put my hand here, and you just should feel the steady, constant stream of air in your hand. Now, if you cannot hold your breath for the entire 7 or breathe out for the entire 8, of course, it's okay for you to, call it early and continue with it on your own. But let's go ahead and try it. And we're going to try just 2 rounds. And I want you to notice how you feel now and how you feel after. All right. Breathe in through the nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Exhale through the mouth, nice and slow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. One more time. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Go ahead and throw in the chat. How are you feeling now? I didn't even get to do the breathing and I already feel calmer. How are you feeling now after just 2 rounds of that breath? Calmer, relaxed. Hopefully your heart rate feels a little bit slower, centered. I love all of that. all of the things that you were feeling before, the tension in your neck, the anxiety in your belly, that is your body getting you ready for freeze, fight, or flight, right? That is your body getting ready to help you survive. But you can send a message to your brain with your breath when you feel those things happening, saying, hey, it's okay. We're in a good place. And then your brain will calm down. And it's a nice cycle. So we can be in control of these things that are automatic responses. I so love all the questions, all the comments in the chat. It's making my heart happy.
It's important to remember you can't think your way out of that situation because you'll be standing there thinking, I shouldn't be acting this way. This is absolutely ridiculous. This is not who I am. You can be thinking all of those things, and your body is still in reaction mode of some type. The only way to calm down your nervous system is breathing and rhythm. That's it.
The brain and body communicate, and we can help them communicate.
Yep.
Okay. This is a little bonus. It's one of my favorite things to explain, and we have time for it. Hooray! And that is about the mentalizing system and the prefrontal cortex. These are two really, really important systems in our brain. And the thing is that they do not function at the same time. They're kind of on a teeter-totter. When one is on, the other is off. Now, the prefrontal cortex is kind of the logic and reasoning center of our brain. It's not done developing until we're 25, and it's what helps us make our best decisions. It usually handles logic and reason decisions like how long or how early do I have to get up to get ready in time? How do I do this math problem? How do I fit all of these things into my suitcase? And this is all handled by the prefrontal cortex. The mentalizing system is the kind of here, like in the center-ish part of our brain. And the mentalizing system handles our view of our story and our story about other people and our connections to others. Now, if we think of the brain like a muscle and that the parts we use are stronger and faster, it would be useful to know which of these systems is our default system. Which system do we use more often? Because that part is going to be stronger and faster. And so what scientists did was they put some test subjects in an fMRI machine, a functional magnetic resonance imaging machine. And what they were doing with these subjects is every 30 seconds or so, they were giving them a math problem. And what they saw in the fMRI machine was that when the person was solving the math problem, they used their prefrontal cortex. But the second they were done solving the math problem, the prefrontal cortex went off and the mentalizing system went on. That's because it's just that much more interesting to us to be thinking about ourselves and our stories to others. Now, the scientists wanted to apply this information and make sure that it worked out the way they thought it did. And so again, they gave two different set of subjects, group A and group B, this description of an imaginary person. So it was like, there's a man, he likes cooking and long walks on the beach. And it was just this whole page about this imaginary person. Group A was told, okay, you're going to read about this person, and then you're going to take a test about how well you remember this reading at the end. And they watched in the fMRI machine, and group A used their prefrontal cortex when they were reading about this person. Group B was told, okay, you're going to read about this person, and then you're going to set them up with one of your friends on a date. They watched Group B in the fMRI machine, and Group B used their mentalizing system when they read the paper. Both groups were then given a test on this paper. Which group do you think did better? Group A, or one, that used the prefrontal cortex and thought they were taking a test, or group B, or two, that thought they were setting them up with their friend and used the mentalizing system? And we already have some correct answers. It's group B. It's because stories and how we connect them to other people is so much more interesting to our brains. So if we can make school interesting and pleasant and exciting and getting students involved and connected to the materials that we are teaching, we are activating and using the most powerful part of their brains for learning. And that's just a win all around for all of us. JJ, do we want to move on? There we go.
We did. Look at that. Perfect timing.
Practically perfect. So We have another session up in just a few minutes. We have our Q&A at 1 o'clock. I hope, and JJ hopes, I know we both hope, I'm speaking for both of us right now, that
Go
this
ahead.
was helpful. JJ, go ahead. I don't want to speak too much for you.
Oh, I said, go ahead.
I hope this was helpful for you, both in understanding your own brain, but also in understanding your students' brains. All brains are different. All brains are ready to learn. We just have to connect them and meet them right where they're at.